Welcome to the April 2016 episode of This Week in Germany, the podcast about German culture, society and politics. Rob's away this month on his holidays in Vienna, but I'm not alone in breaking down this month's news. Helena Humphrey will be here to talk about the song which has caused a controversy.
Ein Journalist, der was verfasst, dass Erdogan nicht passt, ist morgen schon im Knast.
It's really led to this diplomatic spat with Turkey.
Friend of the show and tour guide extraordinaire Wouter Bernhardt will be here to tell us about his favourite location in all of Germany.
A little mountain with a pedestal on top of it, which has a 6-meter high sculpture of a soldier holding a sword and a baby in its arm. It's a little out of proportion.
All that and plenty more besides coming up on this episode of This Week in Germany. And joining me now in the Twig studio is Olcan Hiller. Hello, Olcan.
Hi, Daniel. Pleasure as always. Thanks for having me.
You've been on a new adventure, haven't you?
I have. I've been on a sort of film adventure, so to speak. An audio film adventure, though, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And particularly something which native English speakers find quite strange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I went to have a look into dubbing. Because it's something that, as someone who's living in Germany, it's something that sort of surprised me and shocked me because it's just so widespread here.
And for those people who haven't really seen a dubbed film before, it is essentially where the film might be, let's say, a Hollywood film, where the words in another language are spoken over the actors.
Exactly. They translate the entire script and they have German people say the translated lines in sync with the people who are saying on screen. It sounds very strange, but it's the most normal thing for German people.
Okay, well then, let's find out some more.
Picture the scene. You're living in Germany, you sit down, turn on the TV, and see that Casablanca is playing. Great. I love that film. But as you're watching it, instead of hearing the classic line,
"He's looking at you, kid,"
you hear,
"Ich sehe dir in die Augen, Kleines."
Now, for the non-German speakers, this means nothing, and probably are rooting through their DVD collection or Netflix for the English version so they can watch the version they actually understand. But even for those that speak German, we know that this is not the same as the classic line in the English version. The line, which translated means, "I'm looking into your eyes, little one," definitely does not have the same effect as the original. While dubbing is definitely not just a German thing, Germany has one of the largest dubbing industries in Europe, dubbing not only films, but also TV shows and even computer games. It's always fascinated me, even though I'm not a fan of it myself. Whenever I go to the cinema here in Berlin, I check the title to make sure it has the letters OV behind it, meaning original version. And while the translations like the one in Casablanca don't occur that much anymore, it does make me wonder if sometimes some of the original films can get lost in translation. And how did they actually dub a film?
My name is Yvonne Greizke. I am from Berlin, Germany. I dub or do voiceovers for movies, computer games. When I was a kid, I was in a theater musical group, and we had a little show, and someone was watching it, and he was in the industry. And afterwards, he came up to my parents and said, "Hey, we're always looking for kids." And I was 8 years old, and to me, it was just fun. You know, it was exciting. It never felt like work to me.
The company was founded in 1971.
That's Rainer Ludwig, managing director of FfsA, a dubbing studio in Berlin.
I think offices and studios is about 1,600 square meters. We count every project, and now we are at number about 7,200, and every number is one series or one movie. I think in Germany there are around 3,000 actors doing the dubbing business. And I think we have between 500 and 700, which we hire for our projects during a year.
While at the studio, I got a tour from the head of production, Michael Johnson. It included a peek into one of the studios that's working on a big Hollywood blockbuster. While I was there, he explained how they actually constructed it.
Now here we are. This basically what you see now is completely rebuilt from scratch. This used to be like a huge surface. Okay. The studios we built them on support systems, basically on rubber pillars. Okay. So they're floating, really, floating studios. So we don't have any problems, for instance, with the construction across the street. Or that vibration that normally goes through a house, we do not have here. So the studios are independent from vibration on the outside.
Which was all very interesting, but I still wasn't sure how they actually did it. How do you change a film's language and still keep the essence of the film? Or is that even possible?
So when you have a movie from America and someone's probably, you hear this New York accent and then you hear something from Texas, and in English you hear that. In German we have to do it with acting. We can't do it with the language. We have to do it, with the character.
The normal people cannot divide between is the sound good or is the picture good. They say, I like this movie, I do, and I don't like it. And if you make subtitle, most of the people they don't like it. They would like to have the impression Brad Pitt, as an example, speaks German.
You cannot have a German accent, for example. You can have a Berlin accent, it's probably helpful if you can do it, but you hardly ever have to do any kind of accent, so you should just have a proper German,
So accents are lost during the process, which makes me wonder, what else is affected? How do you translate a comedy into German so that Germans would understand the joke?
Comedy, it's, as you can imagine, not easy. There are only a few authors and directors who have the profession to dub comedies. If you can, there's a joke which works only in the United States, you have to transfer it to German, and not every political joke which works in German, in the United States or in Great Britain doesn't work in Germany. So you have to find an alternative.
So while it seems that certain parts can become lost in translation, what made them start dubbing films in the first place? Where did it all begin, and where is it going from here?
When the movie was founded, Stummfilm, do you know what?
Silent films.
Silent films. Some of scientists in America, they thought, you can sell a movie at best international if you have silent films, because you can transfer it to every country. In the 30s or 40s, 1930s or 40s, the dubbing was created. And because of the technical possibilities we had, it was not so good as we do it these days because of our technical environment. If you will bring the content of a movie, of a foreign movie, like, say, Chinese or Spain or French, to the audience, there's no better way than dubbing. You cannot write all down in subtitling. And what you can read between the lines, you can only bring it to the audience with a very good dubbing. And this needs from our dubbing actors to play like an actor in front of the microphone.
Now all the series, Netflix and everything, you have so many series, and they all, almost all of them are being dubbed. So we actually have a lot of work right now, which is nice for us, of course, but also the pressure is going up with that. The
dubbing volume has increased a lot because of Amazon and Netflix, and so it has a big influence in our market. We need for dubbing for a movie of, let's say, 100 minutes runtime, between 4 to 6 or 7 weeks. The time frames are getting smaller and smaller, and there are a lot of new people coming in, because there's just not enough time and we can't do everything, so there's so many new people right now. While on the tour, Michael Johnson talked to me about another medium that is upping the ante when it comes to dubbing.
So we had a lot of very high-profile actors bringing their voices, and high-profile directors, who, like the guy who directs the Marvel movies for us, Bernhardt, he also directs them for Blizzard, for the video games, in the same story and recording studio, so they like that. So that's something that is very important in the gaming industry, becoming more and more important.
So with things like accents and certain jokes not really translating, I wondered if this will affect things down the road, and less people will choose dubbed media as English becomes more widespread.
It has to do with the quality of dubbing. My children have two daughters, about 22 and 25. If the dubbing is bad, they look the original version. Of course, most of the young people speak English these days, and so they say, oh no, it's a bad dubbing, I look English. Subtitling are only to help to understand some things.
Do you yourself watch dubbed series and films, or do you actually watch it in English?
Both. When I was coming back from New York, I saw it only in English. But now in my relation, my boyfriend always says, oh, no, let's watch it in German, please. I don't want to think now. And then usually we watch it in German, and it's kind of nice as well. I mean, for me, it's kind of, I always look too closely and I think about what there's, sometimes I think about, oh, that's him, oh, that's my friend, and oh, that's, I recognize the voices, I know the people, and I listen closely to what they're doing, and we call it Berufskrankheit.
It's cultural in Germany, and it's much more comfortable. I sometimes look, my English is not as good as of my mother language, but sometimes I look original version with subtitles to improve the English. I think a lot of people do this, but it's comfortable to sit in the evening on the chair and look at the movie and to see it in German.
Dubbing doesn't only make the film experience more comfortable for the viewers, it's also more comfortable for the actors too.
I don't have to put on any makeup. I can actually go in my jogging pants in the morning and no one cares. That's nice.
So that's probably maybe one of the better parts of the voice acting?
Totally.
So a fascinating look into the world of dubbing there. Olcan, what do you think that you've learned on your trip through the background, the behind-the-scenes look at the dubbing of films?
Well, from speaking to both of them, Yvonne and Rainer, I think the first thing that I learned is actually that dubbing has come a long way. I mean, the two clips that we heard at the beginning of the show, I mean, that's from the 1940s. So, I mean, it's come a long way from then. But still, there's just something missing from a dub version. Things like humor and accents, they can't translate those things. So I kind of feel like that even though they've progressed so much, there's something still being lost in translation. But then on the other hand, I went into this thinking, no, I hate dubbing. There's no point. It makes no sense. But then I sort of realized that dubbing is to make sure that people can enjoy a film. When they don't speak the language, they still want to enjoy it. It's entertainment. It shouldn't be work. So I actually see their point of view in dubbing a lot more now.
So are you going to watch more films dubbed into German? Because I know you speak German, so will you watch more dubbed films?
Nope. No, I'm still going to be running around searching for cinemas with that magical OV at the end, because I can't do it. I can understand it, but I can't do it.
It's so strange for us native English speakers to watch the actors' mouths moving but different words coming out. But it's the same, if I watch something in German, I want to watch it in the original German, even with subtitles if necessary.
I mean, that's the society or whatever that we grew up in, that when we watch a foreign film, I mean, majority of times, there's obviously some people who still watch it dubbed into English, but it's not such a widespread thing as it is here. I mean, it's everything. Computer games. I mean, when's anybody played a computer game that's dubbed outside of Germany? It's very strange to me.
All right, Olcan Hiller, thank you very much for delving into the world of dubbing for us.
My pleasure.
It's time to get your news in brief now, and we're starting off in Panama. 11 million pages of documents were leaked from law firm Mossack Fonseca to the Süddeutsche Zeitung. They break open the secret lives of tax evaders across the world, including many heads of state, prominent businessmen and celebrities. The papers have exposed activities by at least 28 German banks. They've helped their clients to squirrel income away in far-off money pots out of the reach of the taxman. Justice Minister Heiko Maas has promised to get tough on tax evasion. He wants a transparency register to reveal the owners of shell companies in tax havens. Hans-Dietrich Genscher, former Vice-Chancellor, has died aged 89. He was instrumental in the reunification of East and West Germany during his time as Foreign Minister until 1992. It follows the death of another former Foreign Minister, Guido Westerwelle, who died after battling blood cancer at the age of 54. He was arguably the first openly gay senior politician in Germany. A car bomb exploded in the west of Berlin, killing the driver. Police say it was likely a drug gang murder and say there's no evidence of terrorist motivation. The organisers of a music event where a stampede killed 21 people 6 years ago will not go to trial. The directors of the Love Parade Music Festival were charged with negligent manslaughter for not having properly planned for the huge crowds. And the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster in Brandenburg has filed charges against the state. That's after they were told to take down signs promoting their so-called noodle mass. A representative of the atheist religion, Brother Spaghettus, said they should be treated as equal to other ideological communities. So since the last podcast, we've had a busy month of news, and joining us now to decode this is Helena Humphrey. Helena, thank you very much for making it into the studio once again.
My pleasure. Good to be with you all.
So we have been sitting out in the sun, enjoying the lovely weather over the weekend. It's
Gorgeous.
been really nice in Berlin. But unfortunately, the news that we're going to discuss has not been so sunny, has it?
It hasn't, Daniel. In fact, we were just lamenting the fact that when we do get together to talk over the news, we often increasingly seem to be talking about terror attacks, and this month, of course, was no different.
That's right. So there was several explosions in the capital of Belgium, in Brussels, in the airport, in the metro as well, and the death toll in the end was over 30 people who died as a direct result of these explosions. So what happened in the aftermath, and particularly what was the response from Belgium's big neighbour Germany?
Well, Germany's response to the Brussels attacks, I think, Daniel, was very much a European one. Leaders in the public coming together in that show of solidarity with Belgium. And it's something, of course, that Germany is used to now. Europe is used to now. We've had this practice, sadly, since the Paris attacks and then the attacks in Istanbul as well. And in Berlin, Chancellor Angela Merkel said that Europe's strength, quote, is in our unity in fighting terrorists. That was her statement after the Brussels attacks. She also said that terror won't force Europe to retreat from the values of humanity, the values of openness and freedom. And that is a crucial message, I think, especially considering that Germany has let in over 1 million refugees and is keen to make sure that that integration continues and is as smooth as possible without prejudice in the wake of such awful attacks. It is interesting to note, though, how do you think Merkel's doing in the approval ratings after the Brussels attacks, Daniel? Can you have a guess?
I mean, I think she must be doing pretty badly. Certainly she was doing badly because of her response to the migration crisis, and I noticed that her poll numbers went down. So surely that's got even worse with the terrorism events.
Well, that's what I thought as well. And then I checked, and I've seen that her approval rating has actually climbed up to pre-refugee crisis levels. And that's according to a joint survey by RTL and Stern magazine. And it found that 52% of people here in Germany actually prefer having Angela Merkel as Chancellor in the wake of attacks, and those Brussels attacks. And that's the highest support for Merkel since August of last year, when it emerged that Germany had suspended those EU rules to allow more Syrian refugees to stay. So that's rather interesting.
So what's garnered so much public support, and also are the public really nervous in Germany about terroristic events, or are they kind of submitting to the fact that there's not really much you can do about it?
I think it's a question that divides the country somewhat. Most people I spoke to here in Berlin felt that the risk of a terrorist attack is just something they have to live with. People have continued to go about their daily lives in the aftermath of the Brussels attacks with a lot of defiance. But I spoke to other people in other parts of the country, and they report that public transport in places like Frankfurt, where of course you have the European Central Bank and stations there, were all but empty. Now, in terms of the government's response and garnering public support, Merkel was really at pains to point out very quickly that the German Foreign Ministry and the security services were already working closely together to identify those responsible for the blasts in Brussels at the airport and against the metro passengers. Then, of course, there was the statement from the federal police. They stepped up security at the German borders with Belgium, with Luxembourg and the Netherlands, as you might imagine. And some stations were on high alert. Frankfurt station, for example, the intensified police presence there with protective gear was very noticeable. And I've been at many tourist sites this past weekend in the sunshine, and I've been subject to a lot more security checks than I used to be here in Berlin. As for whether these intensified security measures at airports, at main train stations and so on will continue, we don't really know. A spokeswoman for the Berlin police said that when it comes to extra security measures on public transport, they're already at a high level, and they're constantly being adjusted depending on perceived security threats.
So that's the short-term response. But what will the long-term response be? And I know that Thomas de Maizière, the Interior Minister, has had something to say on this.
I think this is where it gets really interesting, really crucial, and is almost a bit of a volte-face in terms of the German response, because you're alluding to that call by the German Interior Minister, Thomas de Maizière, for a Europe-wide data control, he said, to fight terrorism. Now, basically, Daniel, he was making a case for stronger European cooperation on exchanging personal data, including, this was his idea, common data pots, which European secret services can access. So say I'm an agent in the French Secret Service and I want to find out something about you here in Germany. I don't have to seek permission from the German government, and that is very new. And I think his statement was really interesting. He told the public broadcaster ARD that data protection's all well and good, but in terms of crisis, security comes first. And I just think that really is the volte-face. Despite the defiance of people in Germany in the wake of the threat of terrorism, could they be prepared to give up some of their data protection? That's really revolutionary for Germany. Germany's always been the country where you feel that perhaps your data's a little bit safer than other countries, but could that be changing? That's the question now.
Yes, that is the big question. We'll just have to wait and see how far the German government gets with its long-term proposals against terrorism. But now we're going to move on to another story. And we're staying in Europe, but we're going to Turkey, and their response to a German satirical video has made the relationship between Germany and Turkey just that little bit more rocky recently. So here, take a listen.
Sei schön charmant, denn hat dich in der Hand. Erdo wie, Erdo wo, Erdo war. Die Zeit ist reif für sein großosmanisches Reich. Erdo wie, Erdo wo, Erdogan.
So, Helena, yeah, that's a very interesting music video for people who don't really understand what's going on because of the German language. What's going on here in this clip?
This is a crazy story, Daniel. Really one of these how did it come to this stories. Essentially, as you said, Daniel, that satirical TV show here in Germany called Extra 3, which is funded by a regional public broadcaster, I should say, came up with this rather creative song, which you just heard, lampooning Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan for his crackdown on civil liberties in the country and media freedom as well. Now, Erdogan's government has been accused of increasing authoritarianism, muzzling critical media, for example, as well as lawmakers, academics, lawyers, NGOs, and so on. So they came up with this satirical song, which you just heard, which is called Erdo vi, Erdo vo, Erdo van. It's really led to this diplomatic spat with Turkey. Now, you might have recognised it when you heard it, because it's actually set to the tune of Nena's song Irgendwie, Irgendwo, Irgendwann. And it makes these charges. It's got very different lyrics, of course, to Nena's hit. One of the charges that you'll hear in the lyrics is that a journalist who writes something that Erdogan doesn't like will be in jail by tomorrow. Now, when Ankara heard this, the Turkish ambassador to Germany actually called the broadcaster and demanded that it actually be pulled off air.
And Germans are used to political satire of their own politicians, and German politicians don't really respond to it, but Erdogan threw a hissy fit, didn't he?
Absolutely, he did. He was outraged, and there were these calls, these diplomatic calls. You think perhaps that it's done and dusted. We hadn't heard much more of the song. We should say, of course, YouTube. Once something's on YouTube, it goes viral. When I last looked, this song had over 2 million hits, so it's out there anyway. But we did think that this had died down a little bit. However, the producers at Extra 3 decided this past week, I saw, to show the song again. Now get this, with the Turkish subtitles. So the presenter Christian Ehring said as he introduced the song again with a bit of a wry smile, perhaps Erdogan didn't understand the piece first time around. Of course, that controversy and the fact that they've added the Turkish subtitles means as well that the large Turkish population here in Germany, if they don't understand it in German, they can now access it and understand it as well. So it's really kind of putting salt in the wound, meaning that the Turkish population, the diaspora and the people back at home can really understand the allegations against Turkey and can really understand why people are concerned about the human rights situation there.
Good to see Extra 3 biting back there with those subtitles and spreading the message a little bit further. But was the German government very vehement in its opposition to Erdogan's call to shut this video down?
No, they weren't. It was a bit of a slow response, let's say, and I think that slow response is kind of what drew Ankara's ire in the first place. The problem was, apparently, the German government was, quote, lost for words, according to the Frankfurter Allgemeine newspaper. Merkel's spokeswoman said that Berlin's ambassador to Ankara made it clear to his Turkish counterparts that values such as freedom of expression are non-negotiable. German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier said, we should be able to expect a partner country of the European Union to share our values, that press freedom should be upheld, should be maintained. But there really wasn't this kind of big public statement. And that was really interesting. Is that something to do with the fact that some countries in the European Union don't want to criticise Erdogan publicly, despite the fact that many journalists, many citizens around the world know what is going on increasingly in that country? Could that reason be the fact that, there's the feeling that the EU is depending on Turkey to limit the flow of people coming to Europe at the moment in the wake of the refugee crisis? So I think Merkel's government ended up drawing some fire over its delayed public response in regards to the spat, and there is the feeling perhaps that there's some reluctance to directly criticise Erdogan at the moment.
So if you have an opinion on any of the stories that we've talked about, send us a message on Twitter. Our Twitter username is thisweekgermany, or contact us via our website, thisweekingermany.de. Helena, it's been a pleasure for me, as always. I hope it's been a pleasure for you too.
As always. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, now go and enjoy the sun a bit more.
I will do.
And that music can only mean one thing, well, two things. Either the president is in town or it's Destination Germany time. Now, normally this is Rob's feature, but he's away on holiday right now. He'll be back next month. So I can't really do this alone. To assist me with Destination Germany this month is our resident tour guide and Berlin expert, Wouter Bernhardt.
Hello.
Now, you may recognize Wouter from a couple of episodes of Twig, but he also has his own podcast, Walrus and the Bear, where he investigates a new site in Berlin every single episode. So, Wouter, what are you going to talk about in Destination Germany?
Well, I would like to speak about actually the place that I'm living myself, because I think that's interesting. It's more a residential area where I'm living. There isn't a great deal of huge touristic highlights here, but I do think it's a very fascinating area.
So what part of Berlin are you talking about, and what makes it so interesting?
Well, the area I'm talking about is the area around Oranienstraße. I'm living around Görlitzer Bahnhof. It's a fascinating place. I'm talking about the Oranienstraße because it's quite a long street with a huge amount of bars, little restaurants, cafes, but also a fair amount of little gallery spaces. And I do tend to walk down that street quite often, I must say.
Okay, and it's not just a cool place for Berlin hipsters, but it's also a very historical area as well.
That's absolutely right. It's about a very recent history, namely 25 years ago. This is the place also where the 1st of May protests took on quite heavily. It's the place around Skalitzer Straße, around Oranienplatz, that by the end of the 80s, actually, a lot of protests went down due to the 1st of May demonstrations. So that means that there is a lot of things getting broken, banks getting taken apart, windows getting smashed. and also a huge police force trying to maintain that here in this specific part of the city.
So really we're talking rioting.
It is absolutely, it's rioting to the max. Actually, the place that I'm living next to right now is... I'm living next to the mosque. There's a huge mosque on the corner of Wienerstrasse and Skalitzerstrasse. And that's actually a place where there was a big supermarket called, I think, Bolle. I'm not entirely sure. But that place fully burned down due to the riots of the 1st of May. I think by the end of the 80s or the beginning of the 90s.
And every year we hear about another controversy. Are there going to be enough police to be able to control these riots? These demonstrations on every 1st of May are still continuing, aren't they?
Well, but people have said that, but I actually haven't noticed any rioting since I've lived here. I mean, I've been in Berlin for the last 3 years now. I spent the last 3 years actually celebrating the 1st of May celebrations, and not demonstrations, but celebrations. And it's actually a really fun place to be. It's super crowded. There's a lot of music going on. There's a lot of families walking around. All the streets are closed off. And although there's always a big police force you can always see them in the side streets. I haven't seen any big demonstrations going on. Actually, I always think it turned out in a very nice, almost sort of family event, the 1st of May.
So it's turned from a riot into a family-friendly festival. So well worth visiting in the end if you're a tourist on the 1st of May every year. Check out that fancy part of Kreuzberg being the trendy district in Berlin. But also, for those who are interested in going further back in history, there are some interesting sites nearby.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. We have it, if you step away a bit from Oranienstrasse, you have the Künstlerhaus Bethanien. Oh, not the Künstlerhaus, but the Bethanien former hospital, which is now a art space. But if you go around the corner from here, if you walk past Görlitzer Park and you go into Treptower Park, you'll have something that is kept hidden from a lot of the Berliners, a lot of the tourists coming into the city. It's namely the Soviet War Memorial right in the heart of Treptower Park, which is an absolutely stunning sight.
So how would you describe this monument?
I would say megalomaniacal. That's what it is. I was running around the Soviet War Memorial quite often, and I didn't see it because it's a little bit hidden away from the site, from trees. But then when you walk inside of it, your mind is blown by the sheer size of this huge memorial.
Okay, maybe you could kind of paint a picture of what this thing looks like.
Yeah, you have this pathway towards these two sort of slabs of red marble, but it's all dedicated towards the statue that's at the end of the memorial, which is actually a little mountain with a pedestal on top of it, which on top of that has a 6-meter high sculpture of a soldier holding a sword, a giant sword, and a baby in its arm. It's really it's a little out of proportion with what you normally get in terms of monuments.
Well, if you'd like to see some pictures of the Soviet War Memorial, you can go to our website, thisweekingermany.de, where we have pictures for every destination that we cover. But Wouter, you did a whole episode on the Soviet War Memorial in your podcast, Walrus and the Bear, and I can highly recommend it if you want to find out more about Berlin.
That's absolutely true. That's just one of the episodes I did in the previous couple of episodes. What I'm focusing now on is some other stories. I'm diving more into personal stories. We're going to explain a little bit about why they're living in Berlin. For example, the first episode that is coming up on Wednesday is the episode on the history of the Jewish community in Berlin, which is promising to be a very fascinating episode.
And if you want to listen to that fascinating episode, you can find Walrus and the Bear on the 4000 Hertz podcast network. Just search Google for that or find the link on the show notes for this episode at thisweekingermany.de. But Wouter, thank you for helping me with this month's Destination Germany.
Thank you, man.
And that brings us gently, soothingly, and lovingly to the end of this episode of This Week in Germany. Thank you very much to all of our contributors this month: Olcan Hiller, Helena Humphrey, and Wouter Bernhardt. You can find links to all of their interesting, cool, fascinating projects on our website, thisweekingermany.de, where we have show notes for every episode that we do. Also, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. All the links are on there. That website, once again, thisweekingermany.de. Don't forget to leave us a review in iTunes. That helps us to spread the word. Give us 5 stars, and we will give you all of our love. This episode was produced and presented by me, Daniel Winter, and I'll see you again soon with another edition of This Week in Germany.